Hello, and welcome to the Cisco Support Community. Today, we present a live Cisco Support Community Expert Series webcast event. During our event today, the topic will be Fortify Your LAN with Cisco Catalyst Switching. My name is Sam Knack, and I'm an event manager for the Cisco Support Community. Our expert joining me today is Vaibhav Katkade, a product manager in Cisco's Enterprise Networking Group, covering Cisco TrustX and identity-based solutions on the Cisco Catalyst switching and ISR/ASR series routers. Prior to this, Vaibhav was a software engineer on the Cisco Catalyst 4500 series switching team with experience in Layer 2 protocols, Layer 3 forwarding, Power over Ethernet, and system management. He also has worked as a software engineer at a WAN optimization startup working on data deduplication algorithms. Vaibhav holds a master's degree in electrical engineering from the University of Southern California. Also joining Vaibhav today are Gokul Nair, a product manager on the Networking Operating System Technology Group. Gokul has 7 years of experience in various Cisco technologies with the main focus on campus access, network security, and data virtualization. He holds an MBA from IIM Bangalore, BTech in Electronics and Communications. Also joining Vaibhav is Hari Prasad Hala, a technical marketing engineer, also with the Network Operating System Technology Group. His focus is on all aspects of enterprise access security, predominantly on identity-based networking and the Cisco TrustX solution. He has hands-on technical expertise on IEEE 802.1x, 802.11, 802.1AE, MACsec, Radius, PKI, Cisco Secure ACS, ISE, and other security routing, switching protocols and products. Hari Prasad has around 10 years of industry experience and holds a Master of Science in Information Technology from Manipal University. And last, Karal Arangasmi is a Cisco Security Services Technical Marketing Engineer for the Enterprise Networking Group, managing technical marketing aspects of various security features, including TrustX, identity, threat defense, and VPN solutions on enterprise networking products such as Catalyst switches, wireless, ISR, ASR, CSR platforms. He has 20 years of industry experience in networking and has presented technical sessions at Cisco Live events and roadshows. Welcome, everyone. Now I'd like to briefly outline the format for today's Expert Series webcast. Vaibhav will start with his presentation for the first 60 minutes of the program, and then we'll dive into the live Q&A session for the remainder of the event. During our live presentation, you may submit questions to be answered by Vaibhav and the team of Cisco technical experts using the Q&A box on the right side of the console. The team of technical experts is well-versed in Cisco Catalyst switching, so please begin posting your questions now to give them the best chance of answering. Also, if you experience any technical issues, please post your questions in the chat window. We'll be asking polling questions during this live webcast, and we highly encourage you to participate. You may also download a copy of today's PDF presentation using the link in the chat window. And now let's get started with today's event. And we will start with some polling questions. And at this time, I'd like to go ahead and hand the mic off to Vaibhav, who will discuss how to fortify your LAN with Cisco Catalyst switching.
Thank you, Sam, for the introductions, and welcome and good morning, everyone, to the call. I'd just like to begin with getting a sense of the audience that we are talking to so that we can accordingly tailor the conversation, keep it high level or deep dive into certain areas based so that we can cater to most attendees and the roles that they're currently satisfying the organization. Now, this presentation is kind of interesting because it happens at the intersection of security and network technologies. So we really like to get a sense of, what's your background? Is this an audience that's primarily focused on networking or primarily on security? And how many of you are Cisco employees and partners? So with that, please, we got some results coming in. And it looks like most of them are Cisco employees and partners. And a quarter of them, this largest percentage, are actually focused both on networking and security. The security-centric people are really just a minority here. We kind of gave the presentation more towards the networking side of the house. Now, the second one is what's your level of familiarity with the Catalyst switching portfolio? Since most of your networking folks, perhaps you're completely familiar, but please go ahead and answer your questions there. Okay, and we should be getting the results in a moment coming up. Okay, so the next poll question is open. Please go ahead and enter your responses. All right, so while we're waiting for the results to come up, just like to again highlight that if you got any questions at any point in the presentation, just go ahead and enter the response and your questions in the Q&A, and our panelists will be able to answer those questions for you. All right, so it looks like most of the audience here is quite familiar with Catalyst switching. So in that case, we just like to go ahead and highlight the security features that are available as part of the Catalyst switching platforms, which will give you a better understanding of the richness of the platform and all the features that we've got in there, which really makes it the industry-leading platform here. So this is our agenda for the day. We're primarily going to be talking about security technologies, the primary focus being around .1x, which is the primary network access control solution we've got on switches. But it's not just limited to .1x. Based on that, we also have a Cisco differentiated solution called Cisco TrustSec, encryption capabilities with MACsec, and using flexible netflow to behavioral-based threat detection. And finally, how to do your first hop security, that is control malicious behaviors of your end users and protect your access switch ports from there. So before we actually go into the security part and the security features, we'll spend a moment talking about the various switches that we're going to be covering as part of all these solutions we're covering today. And as you can see here, we, in the past 1 year, have really refreshed the entire Catalyst switching platform, right from your access aggregation to your core switches. On the Catalyst 2960 series, we're replacing the 2960S with the 2960X and XR platforms, which is really our lowest end Catalyst offering. Then on the Catalyst 3K series, there used to be the Catalyst 3750X and 3560X, which are now refreshed with the Catalyst 3850 and 3650 platforms. And on the Catalyst 4500, we have got a new supervisor that was just very recently announced. It still goes in your existing chassis, but the new supervisor brings in newer features and capabilities in terms of wireless. And finally, the Catalyst 6500 is also refreshed and has got actually new form factors. There's a 5 rack unit form factor, as well as the new Catalyst 30 slot chassis, which still takes in your existing line cards and your existing supervisors, but it's an overall net new switch. The Catalyst 3850 and the Catalyst 4500 also support the converged access architecture, which is really about enabling wireless access at your access layer itself instead of doing it at a wireless in your centralized wireless LAN controller. So all of these switches form a part of what we call as our unified access portfolio, which is really our premium offering for all enterprise networking as far as switching is concerned. We will be, again, diving deeper into what really makes this our unified access offering and what the various premium differentiated capabilities that we have to offer as part of this portfolio. Specifically as it relates to the security features. Okay, so that's all as far as the the discussion around the portfolio is concerned. We will now dive a little bit deeper into what the industry trends that are driving the security solutions in customer environments. And so it's really about the 3 megatrends that we are looking here from an enterprise networking standpoint is BYOD, mobility, and cloud and virtualization. And as it relates to your enterprise networking environment and your switches, the primary driver here is really the BYOD and mobility trends, where we're seeing that more and more, rather than the end users having their corporate assigned IT devices to work with, they're probably using their personal devices, perhaps their own personal laptops or their mobile phones, to access corporate resources. And what we are also seeing is that, from a security standpoint, from an IT standpoint, this creates huge operational challenges for them, because the mandate for the IT is really about, it's twofold. Not only do they want to have the end users be able to access corporate resources on their personal devices, to be able to provide an optimal experience, to be able to enable user productivity, and to enable them to use the applications that they want to use on their personal devices. But at the same time, while doing this, they're being also tasked to ensure that the necessary security measures are in place while these personal devices are accessing corporate applications, and being able to demonstrate the necessary level of compliance, and showing that they have the right security policies, whether the users are coming on the wired network or wireless, or doing wireless within the enterprise, or from external, or for example, from remote access standpoint. And while enabling this end user productivity and reducing risk, they are also tasked with doing this in an efficient and scalable manner. One of the things about BYOD is the explosion of number of devices and the scale that IT has to deal with now, as more and more of these devices start coming on the network. So how do you enable this kind of optimal user experience and anytime, anywhere access to any application from any while maintaining your lower cost of operations and doing it in a scalable and easy manner? This is what we are really trying to solve from this is the way we see the industry evolving, and whatever we are investing in developing features from a switching, or in fact from an enterprise networking standpoint, including security, is really geared towards what we are seeing in terms of this industry trend I just described here. So as I described to you earlier, is that also our Catalyst switching platform is actually forming a part of what we call as our unified access architecture. And from a security standpoint, this is what the architecture looks like from perspective of entire enterprise networking group. So over here we've got the wired access, which is where your Catalyst switching comes into picture. Then we have got the wireless access as well, and then finally there's the remote access pieces. Now the features that the idea about the unified access is that you maintain a consistent single policy structure that you could actually extend across any form of access, whether it is wired access, wireless access, or remote access. And although you could choose that, hey, you want to have a different policy for a wireless user or remote access user as compared to a wired user on your office, what customers are really saying and telling us is that they still want a single way to manage policy for all forms of access. And that is where we've actually combined all of this policy management for any form of access in the Cisco Identity Services Engine platform. So that, even no matter where your user is coming from, what form of access they have, you still manage policies for all of that centrally in the Identity Services Engine. And all of this management is also handled centrally through a single management point for that is Cisco Prime. Okay, so coming to your network security, we can think about it security in your switching layer in terms of three pillars or buckets, if you will. The first one is around getting to know who is accessing the network, and it's not just about the user, but what we really call as the entire context of access. That is who the user is, what device they are accessing from, what are the credentials, what is the role of that user in the organization, and finding out exactly what his posture is or how he's trying to access or where he's trying to access from. So this is really the whole context-aware identity that really your access layer is best enabled to identify, because that's where the user is connecting from. That's the first hop, and that's where your access Catalyst switches play such an important role in your entire security architecture, because they are really the first hop where you could actually get the full understanding of what is the use that that's connecting to. Now, the second aspect is, after you've determined that who the user is and what he's trying to do, the second aspect is, how do you apply the necessary segmentation policies in place, and this is primarily governed by compliance requirements as to, based of perhaps who the user is and what application is trying to access from, you perhaps want to segment all of these different classes of users and traffic to satisfy with your security and compliance requirements. And the third aspect is, how do you protect your network infrastructure itself? And this is about how do you prevent, for example, some kind of a denial of service attacks or any end-user malicious behavior, such as IP spoofing or MAC address spoofing and trying to eavesdrop on conversations. Or, for example, how do you prevent a user on tapping into your network and eavesdropping on all communication that is there? So, across all of these, especially the first aspect where you're trying to determine the user context, the primary technology to enable that is network access control, which is really enabled by 802.1x. So we wanted to understand where are you with respect to deploying 802.1x in your network, as we think that it forms a very central point and fundamental aspect of actually understanding user access patterns and user identity. So just like to give you a moment to answer this question. So we'll begin with the overview of the identity-based networking services, which is really our entire .1x-based solution. And the results are just in. We see that 30% of the attendees have already an .1x project or are undergoing a .1x project. Then we have 27% which are planned to implement it within the next 12 to 18 months. So I think we've got a majority of the audience here, more than about 57%, which is either has already deployed it, is undergoing deployment, or plans to deploy in the near term. And then we've got 22% who do not have plans to support it, and the other 20% of the others category. So we look at what .1x really enables for you. It's really these, if you can think about it, it's these four kind of high-level solutions. First of all, it enables you to have a BYOD policy in place. And what I mean by a BYOD policy is that depending on which device you come from and who you are, you could either get full access to all applications or get access to only a limited set of applications. And this is especially true in, for example, several verticals, for example, healthcare or finance, where they've got corporate policies in place where, hey, if you're accessing a particular application on your personal device, you are blocked access to certain corporate applications, but you can still get access to, for example, something like your internal web portal or, for example, your internal personal web servers and those kinds of services. The second one is guest access. Now, guest access is pretty much table stakes when it comes to wireless networks, and we've got a pretty well-defined architecture both from a network and an end-user perspective when it comes to guest access. But in several organizations, especially, for example, in finance, where it's an extremely security-conscious environment, the certain parts of even your wired network need to be enabled for guest networking, just to ensure that, hey, if the user plugs into a random port in your office, he still gets the necessary internet access, but is blocked access from all of your other corporate network and the corporate application. And then finally is the aspect about secure access over wired, wireless, and VPN, which is based on how you authenticate and the device that you're using, whether you're actually allowed access to the network, and if you're allowed access to the network, which sections of the network are you allowed access to. So this is kind of similar to the BYOD use case. BYOD use case is just a little more specific in terms of it also based on policies on which device you're accessing. but this is secure and access solutions more fundamentally about how you authenticate to the network and what are the authorization policies, like for example, VLAN assignment and access that get assigned to your port based off how you authenticate and what is your role in the network. And finally, a way to enable all of these other three use cases using a different technology, which we call as Cisco TrustSec. So Cisco TrustSec is a way to achieve all of these three other use cases, but which is enabled rather than defining as security policies based off your VLANs or IP addresses, as you've traditionally done them in your industry standard manner. We have got a Cisco-specific and differentiated manner by which we achieve this. This is an architecture, and we spent some time looking at this architecture, where instead of defining policies based off your network and your IP address and VLANs, you rather define them in terms of your business-driven policies. So we look at the features which enable some of these different solutions available on the Catalyst switches. Now, we talked about one of the first drivers being as BYOD. And this is about really getting the visibility about all the devices that are connecting to your network. And it's not just about the visibility, it's also about how you can create granular policies based off a combination of user and device. And one of the capabilities we've got on the switches is to enable this functionality is called device profiling, or the feature specifically is called as device sensor. So what device profiling really does is, as I mentioned, it's your first hop switch, which has got full information about the endpoint, about what is the kind of protocol and the MAC address of the end device, and also is the first hop where it actually sees all of your DHCP requests and DNS requests going on. So by eavesdropping on this, for example, endpoint control protocol traffic like CDP, LLDP, your MAC information, as well as your DHCP requests, we've got capabilities in the switches to determine what is the end device connected, and you could get pretty granular with this. You can actually identify, hey, is this like, for example, a 7960 Cisco IP phone, or for example, a telepresence unit, or for example, a Cisco IP 7991, or for example, is it a printer or an access point, or even the model of your access point and your printer, right? So what this enables you to do is, in ICE, based off all of this context information that is being determined by your switch, ICE allows you to create centralized policies based off, hey, for all of my printers, put them in VLAN 20, and all of my access points, put them in VLAN 30. Now, you could do it, not only could you do it locally on the switch itself, with the capability that we call as AutoSmart ports, but you could perhaps do this at your network-wide level in ICE. So we really offer you these both kinds of models about local device profiling and local classification, local policy enforcement, or in conjunction with the Cisco Identity Services platform, where you can all do all of this, but in a centralized manner, which is more scalable. So this is where I was telling you the whole aspect about the architecture play of secure unified access, where we really combine the capabilities in the switches with the centralized capabilities in ICE to deliver a holistic architecture for your city requirements like BYOD. Now, we talked about device profiling, but even in terms of .1x, which is an industry standard implementation, and every switch vendor today supports .1x as an industry standard, but we go above and beyond with Catalyst switching, and really making sure that your identity and .1x deployments have all the rich feature richness to make sure that your project is a success, and that you've got the right features in your network to enable your BYOD and .1x deployment just exactly the way that you want to, with extreme ease and flexibility. And often this becomes a huge issue with .1x, where every networking vendor could say that, hey, we support .1x. But when you actually discuss about how you enable .1x, you come up with a lot of different caveats. For example, hey, what are the possible authorization options that I have? Can I just do VLAN assignment? Can I do downloadable ACLs? Can I define ACLs on these switches? and apply them based on authentication? Or, for example, can I do like multiple ACLs or multiple VLANs on a particular port? Can I authenticate multiple users on a single port? So all of these are capabilities which once you actually get down into the .1x project, is that you'll come up with all of these questions. So what we think is that we really, by offering you the extensive set of .1x features, we are best positioned to actually enable a smooth and successful .1x deployment for you. And these are just some of the features where you see as differentiators and the rich and robust .1x features, which we think are critical to having a successful .1x deployment. Things like MAC-based authentication, so you can just not only enable users and devices based on their .1x or password or certificate credentials, but also authenticate them based on MAC addresses for devices which are not user devices, but are, for example, machines like printers and so forth. And then a flexible authentication sequence such that, hey, you can do .1x and do MAC-based authentication simultaneously, but if those fail, you could have a fallback based off web-based authentication. And then is the support for IP telephony. So how do you authenticate your telephony infrastructure, as well as, for example, if you've got a user which is connected behind a phone, how do you authenticate both that user and that phone and put them in different authentication and authorization domains? And then finally, hey, in case I've got an outage of my AAA server connectivity, how can I still maintain my business continuity in all of this while providing the right level of security, but still providing the necessary business continuity for my users in case of AAA failure? And another aspect that we talk about when it comes to an identity deployment, the biggest challenge with deploying identity, it becomes a highly IT intensive task from a support perspective and from an overhead perspective. And the reason that this happens is because oftentimes .1x, when you first enable it, it's either that the user is allowed access to the network or he's not allowed access to the network. And if he's not allowed access to the network, there could be a whole bunch of issues, right? He might not have the right credentials on his endpoint, or, for example, he's perhaps accessing from a different device that's not provisioned, or it could be just that he's hitting some policies and he's not quite prepared for it, or the IT organization is not completely rolled out all the policies day zero. To prevent all of this high IT overhead and expense, and to be able to enable a deployment of .1x in a smooth and seamless manner, we have this mode in our .1x implementation called monitor mode, which really enables you to enable .1x without the necessary outages and location in case a user is not successfully able to authenticate. So what this does is, instead of actually blocking user access in case he is not able to connect successfully, authenticate successfully, the user will still get full access to the network, or perhaps there's another mode which still gives them limited access to the network, while at the same time creating the necessary authentication record in your AAA server, so that IT can come back and look at, hey, these are the users which are not able to authenticate successfully, let me go fix that. And then at a later point, you can come back and then enable full .1x after you see that all of these incorrect authentications have been correctly resolved. So that is how you can enable .1x in a phased manner, and the first monitor mode is extremely critical to enabling that phasing and introducing .1x in a non-disruptive manner in your environment. So we also have a new implementation of identity-based networking, which we call as the policy-aware identity-based networking services, which really enables a whole new scale of flexibility with respect to your identity infrastructure. Earlier, you just had certain specific scenarios. You had certain CLIs which define the port behavior. For example, if you want to enable MAP on it, or if you want to enable WebAuth, or what kind of .1x mode you want to enable. What policy-aware IDNS does is it introduces an event-based action model to your identity definition, so that you could actually define what is the port behavior for all of your authentication in an extremely flexible manner. So you could exactly define that, hey, I want to enable .1x and MAB together, and these are the number of retries that I want to do, and this is the amount of timeout, and this is how I want the state machine to exactly behave. That, hey, first I do .1x or MAB and then fall back to WebAuth, or do I first try WebAuth and then try .1x simultaneously? You've got the full flexibility to do all the exact way you want to have your .1x behavior. As well as, hey, when the user authenticates, what is the service template, for example, a local VLAN authorization or download LAN tool. You get a lot of flexibility into doing all of this. And then we also have this feature as part of this offering called service templates and interface templates, where instead of actually having to define all of these configurations on a per port basis, you define a global template once, and then for your every interface, you just apply that template to that port, and then it also gives you an ease of management, because now you don't have to, oftentimes, especially in your access ports, what you'll see is that you've got a standard template configuration, and that template configuration is rolled out identically to every single, for example, your 300 ports on a single switch and your 5,000 ports in your entire access layer. So using a template-based approach for your configuration management provides you an easier way to manage your configuration, where you have to actually only maintain it once, and then that it is automatically reflected in each of these templates. And it's not only about creating local templates. In fact, what you could do is you could actually also define your authorization templates centrally in ICE or ACS or any AAA server, and then based off your authentication, the appropriate template gets enforced on your particular port based off the authentication. So this is another new capability. This is part of policy-aware IBNS, where you can actually now centrally manage all of your authentications and service policies that get rolled out to the various end hosts. Okay, so that concludes the first part of the presentation, which was all about how do you enable .1x and how do you enable BYOD, and what are the features available on the Catalyst switches to enable that. Now we'll move to the second part of the presentation, which is about network segmentation. And here we'll talk about the Cisco TrustSec architecture and how it enables you to do segmentation in a policy-based, identity-based manner. So, while we do that, we'd just like to have you, again, get a sense of where the audience is with respect to network segmentation, what the most common ways that you've done it. Network segmentation is an interesting topic because there's so many different ways to address it. But we'll be specifically focusing on the identity-based manner, which we think is the most flexible. All right, so we should have the results coming up in a second now. So I'll just begin describing the Cisco TrustSec architecture. So before we actually look into Cisco TrustSec directly, let's look at how you do segmentation today if you were using a .1x based method. Okay, so the results are in here, and let me just go over the results. We're finding that the highest percentage of users, the way they do segmentation today, is using firewalls and ACLs only. That is, 35% of the audience is using firewalls and ACLs for their network segmentation. The next highest is customers who are using network-based techniques like VLANs, private VLANs, VRFs, and MPLS. That's 25% of the users are using your routing switching methods to do your segmentation. And we find that only 20% of the users are using an identity-based methods like .1x to enable network segmentation. So in total, we still see that it's a very significant percentage. If you just sum it up, it's coming to about 60, and about 80% of users are actually doing some sort of segmentation in the network. So it's a very relevant problem to solve, because this is something that, as the results are showing, 80% of the users are actually doing segmentation network, and the 10% of them do not have but would like to. So we're seeing that 90% of the users are actually seeing a need for segmentation, And they're doing it a whole variety of manner. Like, we see that there's a whole variety of ways that people do segmentation. But one thing that I guess I haven't asked, but I think if I ask the question, I'd be getting a overwhelming response that network segmentation is a complicated topic. Whether you're doing it in terms of firewalls and ACLs, whether using VLAN assignment or doing identity, there's a lot, doing it in a scalable manner and doing it in a granular manner is not an easy task just because of the scale of your networks today and the various policies and the number of resources and differentiated services that you need access to. This is a pain point for several customers. So as we can see, the way people typically do segmentation, and as we see from the results, is they do VLAN assignment, or perhaps they've got ACLs, perhaps these are static ACLs that they created for the various ports and subnets, or static ACLs on the firewalls, or perhaps they're doing dynamic ACL assignment based off user authentication. And all of these are really, methods which are based off your network. What we are trying to do with Cisco TrustSec is, rather than doing it based off your network layer, rather than doing it based off, hey, which VLAN you came on, which subnet you came on, which port did you connect, rather than doing it based off all these static network-based manner, we are trying to do it based off your business context. So it's saying that, hey, based off who you are you a doctor, or for example, are you a nurse, or are you like a guest user, or are you perhaps a doctor on PYOD device, and what application that you're trying to access on. So we're trying to define, essentially the idea here is that you define your security policies in terms of the stable or matrix of permissions, where you've got your source users and you've got your destination users or your destination resources. And then the way you define this is not based off your VLANs or IP addresses, but it's just based off a simple matrix that you define here. And this policy gets enforced in your network no matter how your network is structured. And it doesn't matter that your traffic has to pass through a certain enforcement point in your network, like a firewall, but essentially every router, switch, and wireless LAN controller in your network is capable of enforcing this policy. And secondly, this is a policy which gets enforced dynamically in your network. It's not like you have to go and configure or refresh this policy in your network. You just define it once, and whenever you update it, it's really updated close to real time in your entire network. That is the whole promise of the TrustSec architecture, and how you can actually have a scalable, granular policy definition, which provides you this kind of virtual network segmentation capability without the operational overhead of actually having to manage segmentation in your entire network, and being able to do that in a business-driven manner than doing it based off your network design and IP addressing structure. All right. So the other aspect about TrustSec that I also wanted to highlight here is it's about network segmentation, but it's also about simplifying your policies in your firewalls, because now your firewall policies are no longer defined based off IP addresses, but they are, again, similarly defined based off this grouping structure, which is the same whether you're defining it in ICE, or you can similarly define this grouping structure in your firewalls, and have your firewalls also have these policies in a much more stateful defined manner. But it's not just your firewalls which is the point of enforcement. Even if traffic is not going through a firewall, it can still be enforced in a stateless manner in your controllers, routers, wireless controllers, routers, and switches. We just want to highlight some of the use cases that are now possible with the Cisco TrustSec architecture. And you can see here, this is really not just about your enterprise networking. It's really about your entire organization, whether it is your branch networks, whether it's your data center networks, wireless, wired. All of this is today available and shipping and ready to deploy. And this is what I'm showing you here is what we call as system solution validated design, which we call the TrustSec 5.0, which the kind of various use cases that we've validated. And I'll just highlight here the various solutions and use cases that we've validated here. One of them is how do you segment users at your access layer, whether it is at your users in the same domain, and these could be users even the same VLAN or across VLANs across the access layer of your network. How do you segment users within your branch environment here? So in your branch environment, you could have, for example, for your retail, you could have some point-of-sale machines, you've got your digital signage, you've got your guest access. How do you segment all of this different network resources locally in your network? And this could be wired or wireless, both in terms of your branch or, for example, in your campus, your users could be from wired or wireless, and they could be trying to access local resources, or they could be trying to access resources within your data center. How do you provide the necessary segmentation and the necessary access control to the various resources in your data center? And then, for example, for your BYOD users, how do you create these differentiated policies? That's another use case. And the final use case is how do you actually segment resources within your data center itself? All of these use cases can be satisfied through a single policy model and a single architecture, which is really what we call as the whole Cisco TrustSec based enabled network. We'll also talk about how TrustSec can help you simplify your BYOD deployment. Now, the way traditionally people do their BYOD deployments is that for all of their different services, they create different SSIDs on their wireless networks, or perhaps create different VLANs on their wired networks. So, for example, if I was a guest, I would get connected to the guest SSID, and if I was a corporate user on my corporate device, I would connect to the corporate SSID. But if I was a corporate user on a personal device, I would have a third SSID created, which is the corporate BYOD SSID, which has got the appropriate restricted application access permissions defined on it. But what TrustSec allows you to do is that instead of trying to define it based off this SSID or VLAN-based approach, you could really create a single SSID or a single VLAN, and then based off how you authenticated and which device you authenticated, you would get the right security permissions assigned to you dynamically, so that you could actually, although you were all your users, like, there could be a guest user and a corporate BYOD and a corporate user all connected to the same SSID, but depending on how they connected and how they authenticated, the right security policies would be applied to that form of access. And then finally is this aspect about when you enable TrustSec, you're really creating this whole entire ecosystem where, TrustSec, one of the ways it enables security is by tagging traffic and tagging the context of traffic access as part of your data plane traffic. And basically, this entire context of your access and your security permissions now get carried throughout the network. So basically, you could authenticate users somewhere in your access, for example, but enforce policy on that somewhere else, for example, in the data center or firewall. And the way you had to do that traditionally is you had to extend that VRF or that VLAN and map it to an IP address and do it in the firewall. But now, all of this context and security classification information is carried as a part of your inline data traffic, so that you can enforce policy based off it anywhere in your network, whether it's a firewall or your internet edge or your data center, and in fact, create policies dynamically for it on the fly. Okay, so that was as far as the network segmentation solution with Cisco TrustSec was concerned. We'll shift gears now a little bit and talk about the encryption solution available built into your Catalyst 3K, 4K, and Catalyst 6500 switches, which is Cisco MACsec. Now, MACsec is an industry standard encryption for encryption at your layer 2, and since it is being encrypted at your layer 2, it is really a hop-by-hop solution where really every switch along the way has to be MACsec capable to be able to enable MACsec in an end-to-end manner. Now, this is encryption which is done in hardware, so there is no performance penalty on any of the switches where we are enabling MACsec, and Again, this is 128-bit, so it's industry standard, one of the highest, one of the most advanced forms of encryption. And MACsec today is becoming increasingly relevant for a lot of large enterprise customers, especially who've got multiple branch disparate locations, with the events that you've seen in the news, such as the NEC spying and the backdoors on various devices. So customers, especially large security-sensitive customers, are no longer are no longer comfortable that their WAN links, the traffic that's there, is confidential. And hence we are seeing a growing need for MACsec, both within the enterprise fabric, but especially on links that are traversing the WAN environment. And what we're seeing is that people are several times deploying switches like the Catalyst 3K switches at the edge of their WAN links, specifically for the purposes of line rate encryption. And doing it on the switch is, in fact, sometimes turns out to be cheaper than deploying dedicated encryption devices. And also, this is standard IP equipment so that you can actually manage your entire network, including your encryption device, in a single consistent manner. So these are the various use cases for MACsec. As I was mentioning, the primary use case that we have here is encryption of your WAN links or your metro area Ethernet links. The second one is around data center interconnect, which is a smaller use case, but still, this is really about encryption at 1 gig and 10 gig. And that is where MACsec really becomes important, because it is all done in hardware, and you could do it at speeds of 1 gig, 10 gig, and today you've got on the Catalyst 4500 and Nexus 7K, even 40 gig line rate MACsec based encryption, which is relevant, for example, in environments like data center interconnect. Then finally is, several times people have got campuses which have got multiple buildings, and the links that are traversing these buildings are often exposed to the public. So to encrypt that kind of an inter-campus environment, it is important to enable encryption, especially on these links which are traversing public environments. And MACsec on the switches is not just about switch-to-switch MACsec encryption, but we've got some large financial customers which are also using it to encrypt the user access. And this could be from your wired user, connecting from a PC, connecting to the first hop port in the switch in the network. That link is unencrypted, and that link is often traversing public spaces in terms of your office environments as well. So it's very easy for somebody to just eavesdrop on the first hop conversation between your end host on the switch. And actually, in fact, it's able to, if you snoop in on your .1x authentication, it's in fact easy for somebody to spoof a .1x access as well. And this is where your first hop encryption becomes very important, where you can actually enable encryption based off your end host to your first hop switch, and then you're then thereby really able to encrypt and maintain a secure environment of your network. All right, so that was as far as that concludes the MACsec part of our presentation about network-based encryption. And then we talked about how you could actually have a behavioral-based threat detection. And security, as we think, security is not just about permitting or denying access to users and controlling who gets access to what, but it is also about understanding visibility and what's going on in your network. And that's really where security starts, is understanding your traffic patterns. And as part of that, we'd like to understand, we've got, again, a whole bunch of different measures, like wiretapping, span, logging, SNMP, and flexible net flow. And we'd like to understand how are you actually looking for threats based off patterns in your network traffic and your events that are being generated to your network, and if so, how are you doing it? All right, so again, we'll just give a moment for the results to come up, but while we are doing that, essentially what I want to highlight is that all of our Catalyst switches that we are covering as part of this presentation, whether it's the Catalyst 2K, 3K, 4K, 6K, all of these have got flexible net flow enabled in them. And this is, we have, over the years, over the last couple of years, we have invested heavily in making our flexible NetFlow architecture really strong and robust, and also providing a lot of contextual information as part of flexible NetFlow. So in flexible NetFlow, we are actually exporting information such as user ID, device type, the security group tag permissions, and your role in the network. So what this is really enabling us to do is, through a flexible NetFlow collector, being able to have all of this information in an extremely scalable manner and collect this telemetry information so that you could actually monitor all of your network traffic, which includes not only the scale, but also gets the necessary context out of the network information itself. So the results have just come out. We're seeing that we've got 30% of users which are actually enabling flexible NetFlow in their network. The majority, and the clear majority, is actually 77% actually are using logging and SNMP-based methods today, and 36% which are using span or network tapping to be able to get visibility. And only 9% of users are not doing any monitoring on the network for security purposes. So you're seeing a majority, like 91% of users, actually use network monitoring for security purposes. And the way they're doing that primarily is using logging and SNMP, but there's an even split between span and network tapping and flexible NetFlow. And where we're trying to go towards from an architectural standpoint is take this bucket of using span or trying to do network tapping, and instead, if you're able to export all of this information using flexible NetFlow, it really simplifies your entire architecture. And this is where Cisco and the Catalyst switches that we have presented here really are different in terms of capabilities from your other industry standard other vendors in the industry, because the flexible NetFlow implementation that we have is really looking at the entire spectrum of traffic that is enabled and that is traversing the network. What I mean by that is the other players in the industry, they are doing flexible NetFlow, and they could claim to do flexible NetFlow, but they are only doing it based off a sampled manner. They are not looking at all the flows or every single packet that is traversing the network. Cisco's flexible NetFlow implementation actually looks at the 100% of traffic that is traversing the network. Every single byte, every single packet that is traversing is accounted for in our FNF records. And from a security perspective, and to be able to detect threats and malicious activity, this is a real differentiator, and this is really the differentiator between being able to detect threats using flexible NetFlow if it is unsampled, and versus being able to miss critical patterns and miss critical threats in your environment if you are just doing sampling-based flexible NetFlow export. So of course, Cisco Catalyst switches, we basically play the role of exporting all this telemetry information, but really it's collectors, and we partnered with collectors like Plexer and LAN, which really have got these sophisticated algorithms to detect various kind of malicious behavior and threats, and in fact, these modern day advanced persistent threats or evolving malware, to be able to determine that, hey, there's some suspicious activity going on in the network. And it's not just about suspicious activity. One of the things is also reconnaissance activity, or perhaps users doing things that they should not be doing. All of these things could be highlighted through a flexible NetFlow collector using our flexible NetFlow solution. This is again showing you a dashboard view of the LANCOPE StealthBot solution, where you can actually find out perhaps, it kind of gives you this kind of view of, hey, this user is perhaps the most malicious in the network versus, and how critical are the various elements or the alarms that are raised in the network. Similarly, this is a dashboard and a screenshot view of the Plexer solution. And then finally, we've got on our Catalyst 3K, 4K, and 6K, the Wireshark capability, so that you could actually, once you detect a threat based on flexible NetFlow or however you wish to do it, based on your scripting that you've got, like Embedded Event Manager, you could actually trigger packet captures right on the switch itself. And this is really important from forensic purposes, where once you determine that, hey, for example, this particular user is doing some malicious behavior, how do you prove that, right? You could prove that using FNF records, but nothing like actually getting a packet capture from the end host to be actually able to capture that packet and investigate, hey, what kind of malware is this, or what kind of malicious behavior, what kind of a crafted packet are being generated by your end user, and being able to understand the threat in your network. All right, so that was as far as the behavioral-based threat detection was concerned. And then finally is the aspect about first-hop security. And I guess, the primary motivation around first-hop security is how do you control a number of MAC addresses that you see on a particular end device so that you can make sure that you're not exposed to any kind of spoofing attacks or denial of service attacks, which could overwhelm your switch hardware and bring it down. But it's also about how do you prevent eavesdropping of communication because of IP addresses or MAC addresses that are being spoofed, or malicious end user behavior. So with that, we of course had the IPv4 first-hop security features for a very long time. Features like port security or dynamic ARP inspection, DHCP spoofing. But we have now also extended this to your IPv6. And in fact, you might think that you have a network which is not you have not turned on IPv6 addressing in your network, and hence you don't have to worry about IPv6 first-hop security. But in fact, yes, you do have to worry about it. The reason being that although you might not have enabled IPv4 first-hop security in your IPv6 in your network, all of your end hosts and all of your end devices today, whether it's your Windows 7 laptops or all of your your Android phones and your iPhones, they have got IPv6 enabled in their stack by default today. And what that means is that although your network is not especially doing IPv6 addressing, all these end devices are still participating in this neighbor discovery process that is part of the IPv6 stack. And what that means is that any malicious user could pretend to be a fake IPv6 DHCP server and be able to eavesdrop on your communication, or try to, for example, advertise themselves as an IPv6 router, and all of your end host traffic is now going to get punted to this particular malicious user. And for example, he could very easily spoof your IP address and eavesdrop on all of your communication. So for those specific purposes, it is very critical that you enable and take a look at the IPv6 first-hop security in your network, so that the switches, that the features that are built into the switches will actually determine that, hey, this is not an authorized DHCP port, or this is an access port, and it has no business of trying to advertise itself as an IPv6 router. Or for example, it also maintains this binding table, ensuring that the right MAC to IP address mechanisms are preserved, and that no malicious user can spoof an IP or a MAC address and eavesdrop on the communication thereby. Okay, so this just concludes the presentation. We are just about coming to the top of the hour, and we just covered the various methods and the security features that we have got enabled on the Catalyst switching platforms, from identity-based networking to first-hop security, behavioral-based detection, and line rate link encryption. And now we would just probably spend some time covering some Q&A and open up the forum to any questions that are from the audience.
Thank you, Vaibhav. Great presentation. Also, thanks to everyone for participating in the event polling. So at this time, we'd like to take a moment to answer some of your questions that you submitted. If you can't stay with us for the Q&A, please be sure to click on the evaluation link provided in the chat to let us know how this session met your business needs and expectations. And these are some references. Okay, so we have just a couple of minutes here, so we'll go over some questions. The first question is, when is MACsec going to be released for 3K switches?
Yeah, I think the question was already answered in the chat window there. So MACsec is already available on the Catalyst 3750X, and 3560X. And on the 3850 and 3650, we're going to have switch-to-switch MACsec coming by November of 2040.
Okay, thank you. Next question is, what are some of the new functionalities coming in as part of PA-IBNS?
Sure. So policy-aware IBNS is coming up. It has the support for C3PL configuration that will provide you with a lot of flexibility in order to customize your requirements and help your network to be more responsive to security or network down-related events that will be happening. It also has support for interface templates, auto-configuration sort of features, which will help make your configuration management a lot more easier as well.
Okay, thank you. Next question is, what are your migration strategies to migrate from existing ACLs and VLANs to TrustSec?
For hardware that's not capable of TrustSec, that if you want to migrate, you have an option to enable SXPS protocol to bypass those hardware that are not STN capable. For other purposes like software, there are most of the hardware that most of the platforms that support SCT in the software. And also, if you have existing environments with VLANs and static IP configured, there are options to manually map them to the role-based SCT so that you can configure policies based on the roles and still apply to those based on those VLANs to SCT map.
Okay, thank you. Next question is, what Cisco solution provides you with a line rate encryption capability?
Yeah, so we just talked about the MACsec solution, which enables that.
Next question is, what specific method do you go back and find or fix all the bad authentications if you use open mode from the authentication report?
Yeah, I responded to that one already in the chat. So basically, you can use the failed authentication reports from ICE to see which are the nodes that failed. That includes the network device that reported the authentication failure and also the interface MAC address of the device that failed. So you can use that to identify which particular end user device that failed authentication and why it failed. The detailed information also available that shows you whether it's a supplicant issue, whether it's a password incorrect issue, username not found kind of issue. So you can look at the details and identify why it failed and take appropriate action.
Okay, thank you. Let's do just two more. Is monitor mode for .1x available only with Cisco switches today?
So it's the question that whether it's a Cisco-only capability. And the answer is, as far as we know, yes, there are a couple of vendors. Perhaps I think Entrustus has got open mode solution as well. But other than that, none of the major switching players like HP or Juniper have got this open mode solution. And I think from a major switching perspective vendor, I think Cisco is the only vendor which has got this capability.
Okay, thank you. Let's do one more. Where is the role-based policy configured?
So the role-based policies that we talked about in the context of Cisco TrustSec, they are defined in the Identity Services Engine. And you could also define them as in the ACS 5.0, but ICE provides you much more features, the Identity Services Engine, and that's the recommended platform to configure those role-based policies.
Okay, thank you very much. And that concludes our Q&A portion for today. Vaibhav is also hosting an Ask the Expert event that will last through April 11th. So if you have additional questions, please log into the Cisco Support Community and go to Expert Corner, and you can find Vaibhav's discussion in the knowledge sharing section, or you can click on the link that's provided in the chat window. And now our trivia question: how does Cisco Catalyst affect your hospital visits? A, the Cisco Catalyst series mirrors the same technology as bigger hospital machines such as MRI scanners. The Cisco Catalyst series has surpassed the competition in terms of deployment in hospitals. C, Cisco Catalyst series is used in waiting rooms for easier web access and mobile devices. And D, hospitals are using the Cisco Catalyst as a safe option for connectivity and productivity without excessive wires and Ethernet cables that can cause physical harm to patients and staff. So go ahead and take a moment to answer that question, and we will reveal the answer at the end. We have several upcoming webcasts in different languages. The first one is in Portuguese, and the topic is multi-protocol label switching, Layer 3 VPN, architecture and configuration with expert Marcos Ramos. It's held on Wednesday, April 9th at 11 a.m. Brasilia City time. You can register for this webcast with the link provided in the chat window. The next webcast is in Russian, and it is on Cisco software-defined networking and 1PK with expert Anton Sugai. This webcast is held on Tuesday, April 15th at 12 p.m. Moscow time. And again, you can register for this webcast through the link provided in the chat window. The next webcast is in English, and it's on IPv6 security and more with experts Eric Zink, who is a distinguished system engineer, and Andrew Yurchenko. And that's on Tuesday, April 29th at 9 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time. You can register for that through the link provided in the chat window. We also have some current and upcoming Ask the Experts. The first one is on Cisco Data Center Virtual Machine Fabric Extender with Vishal Mehta and Ali Haider. And the second one is SAML Single Sign-On for Cisco Unified Communications 10.x with experts Mahesh Babu and Sarthak Saxena. These both end on April 11th. And then our upcoming Ask the Expert, it starts on April 14th and is on Global Site Selector with expert Swati Chopra. And if you haven't already logged into the Cisco Support Community, we encourage you to do so. We have a brand new look and feel, so please log in and start sharing today. And of course, be sure to join the community where you can share current real-world technical support knowledge with your peers and experts. Also, be sure to check out the Class of 2014 event top contributors on the Cisco Support Community. And if you're interested in conducting an event for us and becoming a top event contributor yourself, please log in and go to Experts Bureau and sign up. And of course, our presence in social media continues to expand, so we encourage you to visit the community and join us through these various channels. And as you saw from the upcoming webcast in different languages, we continue to expand our reach in many languages. We also have launched our Chinese community, so please be sure to stop by and browse through if you speak Chinese. And please take a moment to rate the content of your peers' documents, videos, and blogs. In doing so, you help us to recognize the wonderful content that they contribute. And now the answer to the trivia question is D. Hospitals such as University Hospital Leuven in Belgium are using Cisco Catalyst as a safer option for connectivity and productivity without excessive wires and Ethernet cables that can cause physical harm to patients and staff, and this has helped the hospital comply with safety regulations while simultaneously creating a cost-effective and manageable business model. And before signing off, please take a moment to complete our evaluation of today's session. This will help us to address your business needs and interest in the future. And this concludes our session for today. Thanks to our expert Vaibhav Katkade for sharing his expertise with us. And also thanks to experts Gokuner, Hari Prasad Hala, and Koral Arangasmi for answering your technical questions. We thank you very much and have a wonderful day.